Welcome to Melody Makers, where we discuss arranging and composing and meet the real melody makers behind the music of Melody's traditional music, folkharp.com, and Afghan press music for the harp. I'm Gretchen Monson, harpist, pianist, organist, and arranger, and your host for today. In today's episode, we have a special guest with us. Christa Grix is a harpist in the Detroit area whose exposure to great jazz musicians in her youth gave her a unique perspective on the harp as a jazz instrument. She has been heavily involved with the American Harp Society and currently works in the fascinating field of public radio. Before we chat with Christa, let's get a taste of her beautiful work. This is the Advent hymn, Veni Emmanuel. Good morning, Christa.
Good morning.
So what do you remember about the first time you saw or heard a harp?
Well, I was very, very fortunate to go to school at a school where they had a harp. At that time, I'm dating myself, in the 20th century, towards the middle and end of the 20th century, there was just such a strong music education kind of philosophy in the Detroit area at that time. So my high school had a harp in it. I was actually a piano student, and my piano teacher was also the harp teacher. And I really loved piano. I really loved the repertoire. I loved all of that. And so around the end of my sophomore year and my junior year, I said, I think in college I want to major in music. And my piano teacher, who was also the harp teacher, said, well, if you're going to do that, you have to play the harp. And I will give you a free harp lesson just to introduce you to the instrument. Now, I was never really attracted to it until I sat down and felt the difference between playing the piano and playing the harp. You wrap your arms around a harp. You're very intimate with it. And the minute I tried that and experienced that, I was like, oh, this is for me. So I always like to say the harp chose me. I didn't choose the harp. It chose me. And her reasoning was, there are a lot of pianists out there in the world. There are not, particularly, at this time, in the middle of the 20th century, there's lots of harpists out there now, but at that time, we were a rare breed. So she said, you'll have lots of work opportunities if you play the harp. Well, she was right. She was really right. You know what else I love about it is it's such a wonderful community. I mean, it's a big enough community to be someone, or maybe I should say it's a small enough community to be someone, and a big enough community to, really to make an impact and to be inspired. So I think it was a good decision.
I agree. Wow. I love that story. Fascinating.
Thank you.
All right. So you now have a really distinct jazz style, and it really shows off all the different aspects of how the harp can be played and a great understanding of the instrument in that context. How did you get started on the jazz path?
Okay, so back to my high school. So you would not think this way. I went to an all-girl Catholic school, college prep school. So you would not think it would have a jazz program. Not necessarily as much for the students there, but we had a lot of jazz musicians on the faculty as adjunct teachers. So if you wanted to take jazz piano lessons, there was a jazz piano teacher. If you wanted to play the drums, there was a jazz drumming teacher. So we didn't really have a jazz band or anything, but we did have access to really great jazz musicians, and they would give concerts for us. And the first time I heard them play, which was my freshman year, I was like, holy cow, I love this. I'd never really been exposed to it before, and it just blew me away, changed my life. That one concert, I heard that, it changed my life. So I was exposed to really great jazz musicians from the age of 14, including the piano teacher actually got Barbara Streisand. And she was in Detroit before she became internationally famous. And he's the one, before she went to New York, he was the one who really got her charts all in shape and got her ready for New York. So you can imagine like the quality of music that I was exposed to in high school. I did take jazz lessons, piano lessons from that jazz teacher, as well as other jazz musicians in the area where I would haul my harp to the lesson, and then they would teach me theory and harmony. I learned not from jazz harpists, I learned from jazz musicians, pianists, arrangers, and I think that was great.
Yeah. So what would you want every harpist to know about jazz?
I was actually talking with one of my students about this the other day. When we sit in the orchestra, the harp is usually situated between the string section and the percussion section, correct? And that is because the harp really has a foot in two fields, right? We are a string instrument, but we are also a percussion instrument. And I think harpists should really bear that in mind. Now, the context I was giving to a student was she's a fine cellist. I mean, young, but just doing really well on the cello. But with my apologies to all the cellists out there, and string players, when you're a string player, you can sneak in, right? When you have an entrance or whatever, those string players sneak in all the time. When you are a harpist, you don't have the opportunity to sneak in. Our rhythm has to be just right on the money. That's the percussion aspect of playing the harp, right? We have a sound. You can hear the articulation of that sound, unlike string players, unlike wind players. I tell this to my wind players, so apologies to wind players. Yeah, they have good rhythm, but our articulation has to be absolutely right on the money. So that is back to playing jazz. I hear a lot of players that fill up every space and also are too resonant. And we have to, in jazz, we need to be thinking like a percussionist. So not only the sounds we make, but the sounds we don't make. That's what creates rhythm. It's not just where you play things, it's where you don't play things or where you mute things. That creates rhythm. So that would be my advice. You have to think and play like a percussionist. In my case, that meant I was trained by great salzedo teachers, and I'm grateful for that. But in my case, that meant maybe letting go of some of that, not in classical music, but in jazz. I played lower on the strings often, and you have to play the harp like a percussion instrument. So you should know both. You should be able to play like a string player, but if you want to play jazz, you should play like a percussionist. And definitely in orchestra, you have to think in both terms.
Wow, I had never heard that before. That is very fascinating. All right. So you mentioned you play a lot in orchestra. What is your favorite part about playing with orchestras now?
Well, I have not played a lot of orchestra in the last few years. I spent a good 30 years as just on call with the Detroit Symphony for second harp. I think every day how blessed and fortunate I was to have that experience. Besides the fact that it just whips you into shape as a musician, the other thing that I would say about it is just being immersed in that glorious sound. I mean, your connection with the great masters of music throughout the ages, it's timeless. Your connection with Debussy, your connection with Ravel, you connect with those people and you're immersed in their essence, right? When you're playing Daphnis and Chloe, Ravel is all around you and that glorious sound is all around you and you are in the middle of it. You're taking a bath in it, basically. When I would drive home after the concerts, I absolutely had silence in the car because I had to just like decompress from, I couldn't play the radio or anything like that. It had to be mute, everything muted so that I could just decompress from all that sound.
Wow. All right. So beyond orchestra work, then, you were also heavily involved with the American Harp Society, and you were on the board and then the conference committee for the 2008 conference. So tell us about what the craziest and most memorable things about that was.
So I thought about this in before our conversation today. And I think what I would like to do is just praise my team members. These are not necessarily crazy things, but I will tell you some stories about this. The first is I want to praise Jan Bishop, who just wasn't a liaison for us. She kept the books, but what I want to say about Jan is that she drove up from Findlay, Ohio. We'd meet for about 3 years. We met once a month. And she drove up from Findlay, Ohio, which is a good 2-hour drive, once a month for 3 years. That was her dedication, so I want to praise Jan. Then if we had an executive committee, I would call that the executive committee. Kirsten Elvine, who now lives in California. Here was Kirsten. Kirsten loves chamber music. And she came up with a great idea that we made happen, which is that we wanted to have really high-level performers, and we didn't know how to do it. And not the harpists. I mean, that was easy. But we wanted to have chamber music, and we wanted to have world-class chamber musicians. And we do have them in Detroit. We have great chamber musicians. But she said, why don't we collaborate with the Great Lakes Chamber Music Festival? And they went on board with it. And honestly, we had some of the best chamber musicians from New York who were coming in for the Chamber Music Festival. We have a Great Lakes Chamber Music Festival. That's great twice. People come from all over for that Chamber Music Festival. We collaborated with them on one concert, which was joint between the Great Lakes Chamber Music Festival and the American Harp Society. And we had Anna Kaddafian, we had Jeremy Denk, we had all these New York chamber musicians who you would normally not ever have on a American Harp Society concert. So that's my tribute to Kirsten. That was her idea. Patrician Terry Ross, who was always a sounding board for me, who was always there to support me, encourage me. She was just great. And she was in charge of transportation. And honestly, that woman had the transportation down to a science. She was amazing. Patricia Masry Fletcher, amazing idea she had. We're Detroit. We should have an auto show. And so we had harpmobiles in the exhibit hall. So harpists could test load harps. This involved going to the automobile dealers and getting them to loan us cars for the duration of the American Harp Society. So in our vendor hall, we had like 5 cars and a styrofoam harp that was to size so you could test load. Clever and wonderful idea. And my final tribute is to Ruth Myers, my dear friend, who just organized the performances. She was in charge of programming. She had just such a great program, including a tribute to Alice Shalafu. The harp pen was run like a clock. She was so amazing. And she passed last year. And I miss her very much, but she was really integral to the success of that conference. So I think it was a great conference. It was a unique conference. It didn't shrink on the quality of the music, but I mean, we did things like have a harpmobile exhibit. So it was clever and creative, and I had a great team, and yeah.
Yeah, wow. And what a logistical job. You currently work as the on-air development host for the Detroit jazz and classical radio station, WRCJ. So what does that entail?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked about it. So I'm going to bring you up to date with what I'm doing and what I am planning on doing. So right now I work part-time, about 20 to 25 hours a week, but I love my job. Let me just say, I have been hauling a harp every weekend for about 40 years now. And that's every weekend, hauling a harp there, here and there. Every harpist knows. There just comes a time in your life when you are like, yeah, I love the harp. I want to keep playing it, but maybe I don't want to spend every weekend hauling the harp to another event. And I'm kind of at that point in my life where I did it for 40 years every single weekend. It's time to now kind of look forward. So fortunately, and this just kind of fell in my lap, I was involved with the station as during their pledge drives. I would go on and help with the pledge drive, and I don't know, I just helped out. And that helping out led to, they had an urgent and immediate need for someone to help with their programming. And I happened to be just in the right place at the right time, and it fell into my lap. There aren't many jobs out there in the country for like this, but I happened to get it. And I am so grateful. And I am responsible for programming the classical content of the radio station, basically from 5 a.m. in the morning until 6 p.m. at night, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, which is about 75 tracks of music a day. So if you imagine coming up with a playlist of 75 pieces, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. That's what I do part-time. It's a lot, but it has forced me to study composers, music history, really learn a lot. I mean, my life only involved harp music for all these years. Now I've had to stretch out into the whole realm of classical music, learn about all the different amazing composers out there, all the music that's out there, all the, I didn't know a lot about string music before this, and I've had to learn. And also just be aware of like, what is Beethoven's birthday and how should we celebrate it? Or even looking at, right now I'm programming December 1st. Well, Advent starts the day before, and you can't divorce music history from cultural history, right? The great composers wrote for these, they were employed by the church. So a lot of our great compositions are intimately involved with church history. So I'm not trying to proselytize. It's just that music history involves church history. So of course I'm going to program some Magnificat, on the day after the first day. That sort of thing where I'm really kind of learning about music history and how we should be presenting it to our community. So I've loved it. And I do that. And then we call it begging for dollars. I'm on the air begging for money I probably do about 4 or 5 shifts, at least twice or 3 times a year. I guess one thing that I want to share with your audience is that all things bring you to becoming a better musician if you allow them to. I'm not playing the harp as much as I used to, but I'm learning about music and becoming a better musician. Looking forward, there will come a time when I don't work at the radio station anymore. It just will happen. But my real love always has been bringing my vision of how I hear the harp, to life in the writing and arranging. And all of this experience is going to come into me and influence me as I write for the harp. It all works together.
Yes. And now you have such a big library of melodies. What prompted that first arrangement or composition?
They were actually born out of 1, necessity, and 2, emotion. And I hate to go through like negative things, especially sharing personal negative things in front of other people. But, I've had ups and downs in my life like everyone. And it became one way that I could process that emotion was by putting it down on paper through music. And also just kind of express how my grief in some things, that trying to process my emotion through sound and trying to just kind of transform it into something beautiful. The other thing is, and this is just a nuts and bolts things, I knew I needed to diversify my income. I just knew that because this is a fact of life. We have to make money, right? And there were 2 times when this was like kind of scary. One was right after the American Harps Conference. I don't know if you remember that, but the economy just fell apart. And if you lived in Detroit, that was really, I think we were hit harder than any other community by that. The auto companies were about to fail. I had also given up a lot of playing for a couple of years in order to chair the conference. So I was not in a good place. I had to do some things. And so that necessity is the mother of invention, right? So I started writing. And just to be personal, my father also died during that time. So that is the short story of how that got me started. The second time it happened was in the pandemic. And this is kind of a nice way of how we were able to transition here. I got a call from a director of music who said, in our church, we need to have some solos. We need some music, some original music. But we're not meeting in person. We're only meeting by Zoom. We don't have the money to pay for copyright, so we need original content of, hymns. And I want to do something special all through Advent. And out of that, and I did not get paid much, but I had to produce something new for them on Wednesday. Every Wednesday by noon, that YouTube video had to be out and it had to be original. And for 5 weeks, I had to do that and then start for the next Wednesday at noon. And that is the Christmas book. I decided to do it for Lever so other harpists could use it. And so I had 5 arrangements done. And that kind of got me started again.
Well, we so appreciate you coming on the podcast. It has been so fun to listen to all the stories and the valuable insights, things I'd never heard about jazz stuff. It's going to give me a lot of food for thought, and I hope it gives everyone that's listening a lot of food for thought, too.
Well, I'm just delighted to be asked. Thank you so much.
Christa's pieces are available on Melodies at folkharp.com. See the links in the description. To close, we have a recording from The Garden Path, Christa's original suite of 5 pieces for lever or pedal harp. This is the 4th movement, Trillium Dreams. Thank you for listening today. If you liked this episode, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this. Share the Melody Makers podcast with your family, friends, and any jazz musicians you know. On behalf of Melody's Traditional Music and Afghan Press Music for the Harp, this is Gretchen Monson wishing you a joyful, music-filled day.